abolish their nuclear ambitions, and that has not happened. Any agreement on nuclear weapons still needs to be negotiated and is very unlikely to be better than the original deal under President Obama. He wanted unconditional surrender from the Iranian regime, and that certainly has not happened. They're still there, they're more radical, and they are more emboldened. He wanted to liberate the Iranian people, and that has not happened either. There is a reason they are not publishing this deal, and it's because it makes plain that this is one of the biggest foreign policy blunders in many generations.
And Senator Murphy.
Thank you, Leader Schumer. Let's talk about the cost of this war. American consumers are paying billions more in gas prices. There are families right now that are deciding whether they're going to be able to afford to send their kid to a summer program or fill their gas tank. We've had a dramatic spike in the number of farms who are declaring bankruptcy. Why? Because diesel prices have gone up by 50%. And America's reputation around the world is shattered. This has been a humiliating 100 days for the United States. Brian is right. The president doesn't want you to see this agreement because it is essentially a that none because of this war, Iran is strong. And well, we want
disgrace. Trump isn't just refusing to lower costs of child care. He's actively making it more expensive and harder for families to find, and they're desperate for it. Before Trump took office in 2025 are angry. Of course they're angry. When I was majority leader and Democrats were in charge, we made a historic $39 billion investment in child care that lowered child care costs by 10%, added 63,000 new child care workers, and increased the supply of available child care slots by 7%. America, that's what Democrats did when we had the majority. We helped people with child care. What does Trump do? He slashes it and then proposes billions of dollars for a slush fund for him and his family. What callousness, what cold-heartedness, and how out of touch with the American people can Trump be? On our Spotlight Forum, later today, Senator Padilla and I will hold a Spotlight Forum on state and local efforts to protect free and fair elections from the chaos coming out of the Trump administration. This Spotlight Forum is because the Republicans will not hold hearings on this important issue, protecting our elections. So we have our own Spotlight Forum where people can testify, American people can learn the truth. As Trump gears up to interfere in our elections and discount the votes of the American people, Senate Democrats' Election Protection Task Force is preparing to protect the independence of American elections. Trump's anti-democracy agenda has left local and state election officials vulnerable to cyber attacks, intimidation from Trump loyalists, and federal seizure of election equipment and ballots. Today, we're going to discuss what we can do to counter Trump's interference efforts and uphold the sanctity of our elections. Donald Trump, listen to this. You may not know it because you sure don't act like that you know it. In America, voters pick their leaders. Leaders don't pick their voters. And Democrats will ensure that remains the case in 2026. I yield the floor. Note the absence of a quorum.
Ms. Alsobrooks.
All right, so we were just hearing from Senator Chuck Schumer as there is an absence of a quorum. So there's going to be a quorum call right there as we continue to take a live look on the Senate floor. Senator Chuck Schumer is also talking about the memorandum of understanding between the United States and Iran. And I also wanted to share this with you. This is from the White House. This is a quote from President Trump saying Iran has agreed to never have a nuclear weapon. Also, the story that the U.S. is paying Iran $300 million is fake news put out by the Democrats. President Trump currently in France to participate in the G7 summit, and the Iran war, as well as the U.S.-Iran ceasefire deal, continuing to get plenty of attention today. As we were airing live earlier, President Trump held one-on-one talks with the Emir of Qatar, as well as the Sheikh, and he is going to be meeting with the UAE president as well. So we did want to share that with you as we're continuing to follow all of the developments regarding the Iran war and the memorandum of understanding. We are going to just step away for a brief moment as the Senate is holding a quorum call, but any new speakers, we will bring them to you. We'll be Welcome back to Live Now from Fox. I'm Stephanie Quinu. As Senator Rick Scott from Florida speaking with reporters right here in the hallway on Capitol Hill. Let's listen in.
What's going on? So I think we all like to do it. I don't understand why they're trying to shoot you that hard to come up with a way to do it where we surveil foreigners but not Americans.
Should Jay Clayton or whoever's the DNI have a bigger, more robust foreign policy intelligence portfolio? I mean, he comes from, it says in the statute what the requirements are for the DNI, and some people like him, even on the Democratic side, but they're not sure that he's the right guy for the job because of that vacancy in his resume.
I mean, it's a job to organize information about the president. The president does foreign policy. So
on the Iran deal, have you spoken to anyone in the administration? Have you been briefed? And if not, when are you expecting to hear more details about that?
I've had conversations. I think look, we're all hopeful that what ends up with this is no nuclear weapons, no ballistic missiles, no money for the Houthis, Hezbollah, Hamas, and so that's what we hope. And I hope the strait's open, but we'll see. I mean, I think we'd all like to see the terms of the memorandum and hopefully end up with a real deal. Is it hard? Yeah, it's hard. I mean, these are people that hate America. They've been killing Americans for years. I can tell you one thing. I don't think there's anybody in Congress that's ever going to support giving money to them. And matter of fact, if we have any of their money, they ought to pay for what costs us to do this, to try to bring them to their senses, to stop killing us.
Senator, on that note, there are reports that the administration is considering $300 billion in resettlement aid for the Islamic State as part of this agreement. Would that be a non-starter for you?
I'd be surprised. I mean, what I want to do is I want to get reimbursed for the money that we've had to spend to bring them to their senses. They got plenty of oil. They can rebuild their own country.
So you wouldn't be able to support a provision like that?
I can't imagine that would ever be in a deal.
Do you think Congress needs to approve any sort of deal?
Have you spoken with Vice President Vance on this issue?
I can't talk about everybody I've talked to.
Do you think Congress needs to approve any deal?
We ought to be in the middle of all this. I mean, if we're we're one of the branches of the government, so yeah, we ought to be, whatever our constitutional duties are here, we ought to be performing them.
And you say being in the middle. Do you mean ratifying this as a treaty?
It depends on what ends up here. We'll see what we end up with.
How is this?
If you know what it is, but it seems like whatever we do, Congress ought to have a role.
And how is this deal going to be different than the 2015 deal that Obama signed?
Well, in 2015, they gave him how much billions of dollars? That's not going to happen. They're not going to have planes full of dollar bills sent over there. That's never going to happen again. And if they don't comply, we're going to have to go back and destroy them again because they're not going to get a nuclear weapon. I don't care what they think. Hopefully this deal will make them change. But if it doesn't, then it'll happen.
And we're going to turn to that and listen in.
Anti-fraud task force. Vice President Vance is leading the charge here. He has an incredible effort going on now, and he's working with clarity and urgency. Criminals are now hearing a clear message. No amount of fraud is too small to prosecute. The battlefield against fraud is nationwide, and Minnesota is ground zero for fraud. We know the stories. Let me tell you how bad fraud is in Minnesota. Criminals are using children with autism, as a way to get rich quick. 8 years ago, the Minnesota Medicaid program for children with autism spent $6 million. The money is needed and used to help children actually diagnosed with autism. But driven by massive criminal fraud, the price tag ballooned from $6 million to $192 million going out. How does this happen? Well, the program was being looted by crooks, by criminals, and loaded up with corruption. The money was being siphoned away from children with autism, children in need. Last month, federal officials charged 15 individuals for stealing $90 million connected to the state's federally funded health care program. According to the Justice Department, that includes the largest autism fraud scheme ever prosecuted. Schemes didn't stop there. Remember the fraudulent daycare center in Minnesota? No children, 0 children were actually enrolled in that facility. It was set up for one purpose and one purpose only. It was set up to steal money from the United States Treasury. So I just heard the minority leader, Senator Schumer, here on the floor talking about daycare centers. Why do the Democrats ignore the abuse of daycare centers to steal money from the American people, from our taxpayers? They don't seem to care about that. They just say, send more money, send more money, send more money. And then he comes to the floor complaining about daycare centers when it is the fraud in Minnesota with their own candidate for vice president being the governor, overseeing it, ignoring it, allowing it to happen. They don't seem to care about any of those things. Well, our colleague, Senator Joni Ernst, investigated it. She discovered one of these so-called daycare centers that Schumer's out here talking about as wonderful things. One of these daycare centers raked in over $230,000 from the Small Business Administration alone just during the pandemic. Remember, there were no children at the location, none. The Biden administration looked the other way, and the disgraced governor of Minnesota looked the other way as well. In total, stolen funds in Minnesota have now been identified of exceeding $9 billion. It's a staggering sum. And that's only one state run by Democrats. California is just as bad, if not worse. I would put it in worse. Last week, many of us met with Dr. Mehmet Oz. Dr. Oz runs the Center for Medicare and Medicaid, confirmed here by the Senate. Dr. Oz says nearly half of hospice providers in Los Angeles are fraudulent hospice providers. When you think about hospice and what it does and supposed to do in terms of caring and compassion, comforting those who are dying, not in California, it's used to defraud the government. Many of these so-called hospices don't serve a single patient. Many are shell offices, all in the same office building. Recall, Los Angeles has only 3% of the population of the United States. Somehow, 33% of all hospice providers in the entire country are listed in LA. There aren't that many people or patients to justify that. How can it be? Well, it's a racket. That's what it is. It's set up to steal money from the government, from our taxpayers. And Democrats are well aware of the fraud, and they refuse to stop it. They refuse to talk about it. They want to keep looking the other way. In Ohio, the Anti-Fraud Task Force dismantled a criminal scheme that stole tens of millions of dollars from Medicaid. The criminals submitted false claims for so-called behavioral health services. These services were never provided. Criminals used the money to buy a fleet of luxury vehicles, including Maseratis, Mercedes, and a Bentley. Thankfully, Senator John Huston and Senator Bernie Moreno of Ohio voted for the Working Families Tax Cuts law. They voted to root out exactly this kind of waste, fraud, abuse, and corruption. Nationwide, total estimates of Medicaid fraud are as much as now $120 billion a year, and the fraud got worse after Obamacare became law. Bigger government, more money, more areas in which criminals to steal. Vice President Vance is encouraging states to fight fraud in their Medicaid programs. Those who don't enforce the law will lose federal funds. Mr. President, a pattern has emerged. Democrats run the blue states. They control the big cities. And when criminals steal vast amounts of money from hardworking taxpayers, elected Democrats go silent. Appallingly, we have seen cases where Democrats actually tried to silence whistleblowers who sound the alarm to try to want to point out what's happening. Democrats try to muzzle them. Here in the Senate, every single Democrat voted against landmark legislation to fight fraud, to fight waste, to fight abuse, and to fight corruption. Democrats would rather protect thieves than protect hardworking American taxpayers and the people that these programs are created to help. The American people are absolutely infuriated by the fraud that is being exposed. They're finally seeing the results in combating it, and they want these people to go to jail. Republicans are fighting the war against fraud. We're fighting to protect taxpayers, to protect vulnerable families, and fighting to punish the criminals who steal from our country and our communities. The American people deserve accountability. Criminals deserve the consequences. Thank you, Mr. President, and I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Democratic whip.
Thank you, Mr. President. The President called it the big, beautiful bill. His budget, the big, beautiful bill. That big, beautiful bill did give tax breaks. There's no question about it. Primarily to the richest people in this country. Is that what you think is a priority for America? It's not what I think. It's one of the reasons I voted no. The second thing it did was to cut Medicaid reimbursement to hospitals and healthcare providers by $1 trillion over the next several years. $1 trillion. You know what the hospital administrators in Illinois told me will happen as a result of those cutbacks of Medicaid payments? Hospitals will close, particularly downstate hospitals in rural areas and those in the inner city. We went to those administrators of the hospitals directly and said, forget the political hype in Washington. What's going to happen on the ground in the state of Illinois and across the nation when $1 trillion in Medicaid reimbursement disappears? They said, well, first the hospitals will close certain departments. I've noticed in central Illinois, my own experience, that means usually the delivery of babies, as well as behavioral medicine, mental health counseling. Those are the first to go. But some hospitals just won't make it. The hospitals in rural areas, as you know, are small and willful and do their darndest with volunteer help in the community to stay open. And they are critically important. If you happen to live in rural Illinois, maybe you're a farm family, and there's a terrible accident that occurs on the farm, driving 20 minutes versus driving an hour and 20 minutes can be life or death. And so the Republicans want to cut $1 trillion from Medicaid, $1 trillion, and give tax breaks to wealthy people. Vote me no. Vote all the Democrats no. Those aren't the priorities of this country. And when it comes to fraud, there's no excuse for it. But let's not overstate the obvious. Government agencies across this country are doing the best they can in some instances, but can always do better. I don't think that we have any monopoly when it comes to virtue in our party or any other party. There are those who break the law and should be held accountable, and there are those who are doing their best to uphold the law, and they should be encouraged. To suggest that the Democrats are the party of fraud and the Republicans the party of virtue, you know better than that. People in both political parties could have a tune-up when it comes to virtue, and I add myself to that list as well. Mr. President, Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, or FISA, is a powerful tool for collecting information that has been abused for way too long. Most Americans would flunk the test of what's FISA, what's 702. Here's what it boils down to. We approve under law 702 to allow our intelligence agencies to collect the private communications of foreigners overseas without a warrant. Why? We suspect those foreigners are involved in activity that's not safe for the United States. Am I supportive of that? Count me in. But Section 702 enables surveillance of more than just foreigners overseas. Millions of innocent Americans' text, emails, and phone calls are swept up in this dragnet if they communicated with a foreigner. So if you find somebody in a foreign country whom you suspect of illegal or dangerous activity, and you wiretap their telephone communication, the person on the other end of the phone may not be a foreigner, but American citizens. Unfortunately, it turns out that thousands and thousands of American citizens have their texts and phone conversations tapped under Section 702. Our intelligence agencies, including the Federal Bureau of Investigation, puts these communications in searchable databases that they used to spy on Americans without a warrant. The Independent Privacy and Liberties Board and the FISA Court have documented shocking abuses of Section 702 by our own government intelligence agencies. 702 has been used to spy on American religious leaders, American political parties, American journalists, and protesters from across the political spectrum. Such abuses have been documented under both Democrats and Republicans. But the prospect of placing warrantless, that means no court approval ahead of time, warrantless surveillance power in the hands of this administration is particularly alarming. President Trump and his appointees have repeatedly weaponized the power of the federal government to target President Trump's perceived enemies. Take Bill Pulte, President Trump's first choice to serve as the acting director of national intelligence. Pulte currently serves as the director of the Federal Housing Finance Agency, where he's pushed for criminal referrals against those who have angered President Trump, from New York Attorney General Letitia James to Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook. Even though Pulte himself has no intelligence experience, President Trump chose him to lead our national intelligence apparatus and to help oversee that powerful Section 702. The public outcry changed the president's mind. The president, after he heard from both Democrats and Republicans of what a terrible choice Pulte would be, dropped him, and now has nominated Jay Clayton, the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, to serve as Director of National Intelligence. This episode demonstrates the inherent danger of warrantless surveillance. No single branch of government in the United States should have unchecked power to spy on Americans. Whether this power is in the hands of Bill Pulte, Jay Clayton, Kash Patel, the leader of the FBI, or whoever President Trump installs next. Repeated efforts to rein in the abuses of Section 702 with minimal reforms have failed time and time again. And now the Trump administration refuses to disclose the latest ruling from the FISA court detailing ongoing abuses. The long and ongoing history of abuse makes it clear that without checks from a separate branch of government, Section 702 will always be at risk of abuse. It is a massive delegation of power to an executive agency. That is why the drafters of the Constitution, many years ago, 250, decided that we should never have warrantless searches of Americans. They're prohibited. It's time to stop tinkering around the edges of 702 and make meaningful changes once and for all. That's why I joined Republican Senator Mike Lee of Utah to introduce the SAFE Act, a bipartisan bill in the Senate that would require the government to obtain a judicial warrant before searching America's communications collected under Section 702. But Republican leadership have refused to hold a vote on the SAFE Act and instead have attempted to extend FISA's authorization without any serious reform. I've been through this many times since 9/11. I'm obviously skeptical of this power being given to the government, and I've watched when we find abuses, well-documented abuses, the limited reforms that are finally accepted, and they just don't do the job. Let me give you, from the Brennan Center for Justice report, some numbers that tell the story. Congress and FISA court have attempted to place some modest limit on the government use of backdoor searches, that's what they call it when Americans are swept up, intelligence agency, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation in particular. They've habitually violated any limits we've imposed. In 2022, the FISA court observed that, quote, compliance problems with FBI querying of Section 702 information have proven to be persistent and widespread. Indeed, in March 2022, the government reported more than 278,000 non-compliant searches of information obtained through FISA. These non-compliant searches would include eavesdropping on Americans without government approval. 278,000. Moreover, from 2018 through 2024, the law required the FBI to obtain a warrant before conducting backdoor searches in a very small subcategory of cases involving certain criminal investigations. Despite conducting dozens of the searches during this time, the FBI never once obtained a warrant as required by our Constitution. The abuses continue, and there are those we know nothing about that are going on as of this day. There was an investigation of the use of FISA leading to a classified report, which I've seen myself in the Senate Intelligence SCIF. Members of the Senate can have access to it, but the Trump administration refuses to make it public for the rest of America. That is unfortunate. It makes the argument that I believe is compelling in this case. Republican leadership has refused to hold a vote on this reform measure that Senator Lee and I have introduced. They've argued this program is just too essential to allow for any delay in reauthorization or consideration of real reforms. But yet, just recently, President Trump said that before we reauthorize FISA, we've got to agree to add his elections reform measure, the one that requires ID requirements before you can vote. Now, there are certain IDs which are easy, but the original version of this bill that the president wants, driver's licenses, which we use all over the country, would not be acceptable. Congress has time to get this right. Section 702 surveillance operates under year-long certifications approved by the FISA court, and it has already been recertified through March of next year, 2027. This means intelligence collection under 702 will be able to continue until next March, even if the law technically expires this week or last week. But if my colleagues want to reauthorize Section 702 quickly, there's a simple solution. And my colleague, Senator Wyden of Oregon, made this point on the floor last week. We can bring reform to Section 702 and get larger numbers to support it in its reauthorization. Support these common sense bipartisan reforms supported by a majority of Americans, incidentally, to prevent 702 from being used to violate basic constitutional rights. Unfortunately, our demands for reform have received no help from the president. He's more concerned with pushing the Save America Act, the change in every election, his bill to make it harder for Americans to vote. Over the weekend, President Trump announced that he opposes any FISA reauthorization that does not include Save America, as I mentioned. This act would slap undue burdens and excessive costs on Americans seeking to exercise their most fundamental right, the right to vote. So why would the president support adding this measure to critical 702 reauthorization? Because he's afraid of the next election. That's what it comes down to. He's afraid his party's going to lose in November. You saw when he went to Texas and argued that the Republicans in control there should redraw all the congressional maps for the November election on the chance that the Republicans will pick up more seats. We'll see what happens. Section 702 must not be linked to President Trump's efforts to suppress the vote. Instead, Congress should reauthorize it with reasonable reforms, bipartisan reforms that protect our national security and safeguard America's constitutional rights. Trump's campaign of retribution and attacks on America's ability to vote make this mission all the more important. We cannot allow a president consumed by vengeance to monitor Americans' private communications with no external checks or limits. Our nation's founders understood this well, which is why they created the Fourth Amendment to safeguard Americans from government outreach into their lives, overreach into their lives. For too long, Section 702 has jeopardized these protections, but we have a chance to end that abuse now.
We're listening in there to Senator Dick Durbin talking about a number of items on President Trump's agenda. We are going to head to break, but I did want to share this with you as we are following some breaking news on the border between Washington and Canada. This is a live look just about 25 or so minutes away from the scene as we're continuing to follow the breaking news involving a Border Patrol involved shooting. That is what the FBI is investigating. So what we're going to do is we're going to just step away for a break. We have a lot more details on this breaking news story in just
Jergens Natural Glow Sun Drops. Just drop, mix with my lotion, and glow. The feel-good feeling of Jergens.
Higher energy costs, higher taxes, more spending that drives up costs. That's Sherrod Brown's record. More Washington, higher costs. John Husted will get Washington out of the way. Solutions for Ohio, not more Washington. That's John Husted.
Have you prescribed Livdelzi lately? About 95% of patients prescribed Livdelzi received insurance approval upon first submission. Visit livdelzihcp.com for more access and support information.
You've got ideas, a new project, a renovation that's been waiting. Bauer gives you the tools you need to build, fix, and upgrade at prices that deliver more for your dollar. Bauer, heavy duty guaranteed.
Welcome back to Live Now from Fox. I'm Stephanie Quinu. We are following some breaking news at the border of the state of Washington and Canada. This is a social media post by the Blaine, Washington Police Department stating this. U.S. Border Patrol involved shooting. There was a U.S. BP involved shooting at the corner of 4th Street and A Street. There is no threat to the public. We ask for your assistance and patience in the area while the FBI investigates the incident and the crime scene. All media requests need to go to the FBI. So that is just the brief social media statement just issued by the Blaine, Washington Police Department discussing just some of those details involving the U.S. Border Patrol involved shooting. So this is a live look right here. This is from Bellingham, Washington. I did take a look at the map. This is just about 26 minutes away from Blaine, Washington, where that shooting happened, just a little over 21 miles south. So the shooting itself happening in Blaine, Washington, that is at the border with Canada. The information just coming into our newsroom doesn't have much detail, but we are continuing to monitor all of the social media platforms. What we do know at this hour is this. This is all according to the Blaine, Washington Police Department stating that there has been a U.S. Border Patrol involved shooting. And if you're familiar with the area, all of this happening at the corner of 4th Street and A Street. They did want to emphasize that currently there is no threat to the public, but they are asking for the public's assistance and patience while the FBI investigates the incident and the crime scene. We don't have a live look at the crime scene itself, but no doubt there is a perimeter as this is an active investigation and evidence currently likely being gathered. Also, all media requests are now being directed to the FBI. We're also keeping a very close eye about any remarks or response from the FBI agency itself. So far, we haven't seen any, but we are continuing to follow this breaking news at the border of the state of Washington and Canada, specifically in the location of Blaine, Washington, which is just about 21 or so miles north of Bellingham, Washington. That's a live look there from Bellingham. So we are continuing to monitor all of the social media platforms as well as the live feeds, and any additional information, we will bring that to you. Still a lot of questions at this hour with this breaking news. We don't know if anyone was injured or if anyone was actually shot. And we are still waiting on that. We don't also know how many individuals were involved or what led to this shooting. But any additional information, we will bring that to you right here on Live Now from Fox. We're just going to step away for a moment, continuing our live coverage.
Personalized, customized, truly custom in the community, and it's so needed.
Think safety. Think Grainger. For trusted products to lock, anchor, contain, and protect. Grainger. Call, click, or just stop by.
Welcome back to Live Now from Fox. I'm Stephanie Quinu. During the break, we got a very brief glimpse into what is happening inside this hotel and resort where world leaders are currently convening at the G7 summit. Right now, this is a live look of the exterior of the building, and you can see this is the feed right there. But moments ago, we were just seeing the French President Emmanuel Macron meeting with his colleague there from Japan. It did dip out just a little bit, so we weren't able to bring that to you live, but we are monitoring this live feed, and we've been bringing you, since the very early morning hours right here on Live Now from Fox, all of those live proceedings, including President Trump as he continued to discuss world issues, including the memorandum of understanding between the U.S. and Iran. All right. Also, right before the break, we were listening in to the Senate floor as senators are debating a number of issues, and we're going to continue with that right now.
Time here today, and I yield back.
Senator Virginia.
Mr. President, I thank you and my colleagues for being on the verge of a vote on a matter I've placed before the Senate together with Senator Durbin, Senate Joint Resolution 190. I think Senator Durbin has already spoken, and I believe Senator Padilla will follow me, and then we will move to the vote. But I just want to explain why I think this is such an important matter. The resolution would repeal a regulation that the Trump administration has put in place concerning the appeal of immigration cases. So immigration cases, as we all know, that are heard in immigration courts by administrative law judges often involve very, very momentous matters for the applicants. And traditionally, immigration cases are able to be appealed to an appellate administrative process in case a judge gets something wrong. And the appellate process is designed in all court systems to enable the correction of error. No judge is infallible. Judges make mistakes. Sometimes judges make mistakes because the quality of the lawyering before the judge is not that good. But whether it's a civil matter or a criminal matter or an administrative matter, a real hallmark of the American legal system, and I think it's something we can be proud of, is there is an appeal process to correct mistakes. The regulation that President Trump's administration has put in place that I challenge in the resolution that will come up is a regulation that dramatically limits immigration appeals. So, for example, prior to the Trump regulation, somebody who got an immigration decision from an immigration court would have 30 days to appeal. The Trump administration regulation that I challenge has shrunk that amount of time to 10 days. What is the problem with that? Oftentimes, the immigration judge signals a ruling but hasn't even done a written opinion within 10 days, that an individual or lawyer could know whether there is a basis for appeal or not. And so the reduction of the time to appeal to 10 days is certainly going to have the consequence, and I think it's an intentional thing, to dramatically limit people's ability even to appeal. The absence of a record, the absence of a written decision would severely challenge somebody's ability to appeal. In some ways, Mr. President, the more serious concern I have about the regulation is it also gives the immigration judges a massive ability to summarily dismiss appeals without any hearing whatsoever. So even if you file your appeal within the 10 days, the new regulation allows the immigration court to summarily dismiss those appeals 10 days later, unless a majority of the appellate body wants to hear the case. And so there's almost a default that the appeals will be summarily dismissed. And again, if you look at the time deadline, 10 days to file the appeal, and then you can summarily dismiss within 10 days, a total of 20 days. Again, you may not even have a transcribed court record from the immigration hearing or a written opinion from the immigration judge by the end of that 20-day period. And so this is an effort to essentially make the appeals process meaningless by imposing such tight time deadlines on the filing of appeal and encouraging the dismissal of appeals on a summary basis as to render the appeals process completely unworkable. All right, what does that mean? Let's talk about what this means to immigrants in immigration courts. And Mr. President, I want to use two kinds of cases that are really common in the everyday work of our immigration courts. The first is asylum cases. The United States has had a practice, and other nations have it as well. And again, it's a practice that I think we should feel proud of, that we will offer asylum to individuals who are able to prove that they have a well-justified fear of persecution if they are returned to their country of origin. And this has been used to protect people from torture, protect people from imprisonment, protect people from death, protect people from all kinds of grievous harms in their countries of origin because they're a political opponent, because they're a member of a religious minority or an ethnic minority, because they've been subjected to domestic violence, because they've been pressed into service in the military as a child soldier in countries that force people into the military at a young age. And the U.S., along with nations around the world, has always allowed someone to come in and make this case. I will be subject to persecution, even to torture and death if you send me home. And the U.S. has allowed people to make that case. And my belief is that's a good thing, not a bad thing. Maybe the standard should be a tough standard, but if you meet that standard, you should be allowed to remain here rather than be sent back to suffer horrible consequences in the country where you come from. Mr. President, let me give you a couple of examples of this that are sort of topical and recent examples. President Trump authorized military action in Nigeria on Christmas Day to bomb certain areas and target certain groups that were persecuting Christians. Christians being persecuted in this part of Nigeria led the president to say, this justifies the use of the U.S. military to try to eliminate the threat whereby people practicing their Christian faith will be targeted for torture and even death. So the president has acknowledged that this is a serious concern. And so what if somebody from Nigeria seeks asylum status in the United States and says, I'm a Christian. I'm being targeted because of my religion. President Trump believes this is such a serious thing that he authorized U.S. military action to target terrorist groups in Nigeria to protect Christians. I would like asylum status in the United States based on President Trump's recognition that I'm subject to religious persecution. If you force essentially the evisceration of an appeals process, you run the risk that individuals who are subject to persecution of this kind would be returned home and thereby face the very persecution that President Trump has spoken out against. Here's another one, Iran. Iran's regime is one of the grossest violators of human rights on the planet, to political opponents, to religious minorities. There are Iranians in the United States right now who have active asylum cases and are attempting to demonstrate, please don't send me back. The work that I've done in Iran against the regime will immediately get me imprisoned or worse should I be sent home. And so if you're going to have a protection for asylees, if you're going to say we don't want to send people back to a place where they're going to be tortured or killed for an illegitimate reason, you shouldn't turn the immigration appeals process into essentially a worthless process that does not provide protection for people who have a high risk of suffering if we make a mistake in an immigration case. So that's one kind of case, and it's an asylum case is a standard everyday case in our immigration courts. And I think there's a pretty strong motive that we not make mistakes in these cases, but we get them right. And an appeals process that is substantive and significant increases the chance that we'll make the right decision, and eliminating the appeals process or dramatically reducing it increases the chance that we'll make a mistake. Second kind of case, Mr. President, that is also just the everyday case, whether somebody, because of their immigration status, will be deported. Those cases are happening as we're speaking right now in immigration courts all over the country. Now, the cases tend to turn on, a legal question about somebody's immigration status and whether they're subject to deportation because of their status. But Mr. President, at the base of this case, there's a legal issue, but most of these cases, the real issue is family separation. Will we separate children who were born in the United States from parents who came here in an undocumented status? Almost all of these cases about deportation involve families, and almost all of them involve families that have mixed status. Some might be U.S. citizens, some might be green card holders who are seeking to be citizens, some might have humanitarian parole, some might be special immigrant visa status, and some are undocumented. And so while a case in an immigration court might seem like it's about a code provision, the human issue in the case is whether we maintain a family together or whether we force a family to separate. And there is not a more significant issue ever litigated in any court in this country than that. My wife, Ann, and I've talked about her probably too much on the Senate floor because I'm so proud of her, but one of the chapters of her professional life was she was a juvenile court judge in the Richmond Juvenile and Domestic Relations Court for 9 years, and for the last 3 years she was the chief judge of the court. Now, the work, Mr. President, I know you know this, of a juvenile court judge is really tough because you're dealing with the worst things that people do to each other. You're dealing with child abuse cases. You're dealing with kids who are the victims of horrible crimes, and sadly, kids who commit horrible crimes. The number of times my wife had to preside over murder cases, again, somebody murdered or a young person who commits a murder, grim stories, and she would come home in a bad mood because of that case. But the worst cases my wife ever had to preside over were not the murder cases. They were not the child abuse cases. My wife said the hardest cases for a juvenile and domestic relations court are cases involving the termination of parental rights. A parent has had a child. That parent might have been sentenced to prison. The parent might have an addiction issue. The parent might have had neglect issues or might have had serial abuse. And maybe the parent did a whole lot of bad things to this child. And now there's a legal proceeding before the Juvenile and Domestic Relations Court. Will the parent's right be terminated forever? I mean, it's a forever decision. It's a decision about family separation. And my wife would come home from those cases and say, these cases are tougher than the murder cases. They're tougher than the child abuse cases. When you're sitting as a judge and you're looking across the dais at somebody, and the question that you have to decide is, will I terminate this mother, terminate this father's right to be the parent of this child forever? Those were the toughest cases. The toughest cases. That's what these immigration cases are. They're cases about a provision of the immigration code, but the consequence is family separation. In the instance of a deportation, it might be family separation forever. My wife would say, though, I hate these cases, but thank God there's an appeal. In the Virginia system, a decision about a termination of parental rights could be appealed up to the circuit court. And she used to say, I'm a smart judge. I listen real carefully. I try to decide right, but I'm not an infallible one. I might make a mistake. And the fact that there is an appeal that is essentially an appeal of right, that the individual can immediately file an appeal, and that appeal has to be heard in the circuit court, that gave her a little bit of comfort that if I make a mistake, there can be somebody who can correct the mistake and not terminate somebody's rights to be a parent for the rest of their life over their own child. That's what these immigration cases are. In fact, I think even a higher percentage than dealing with asylum status are cases about deportation of people over their legal status. And in almost every one of those cases, it's really a case at root about family separation. And it just strikes me that when the stakes are that high, and if we acknowledge our own infallibility as legislators and as judges, having an appeals process that's meaningful isn't a bad thing. It's not something we should try to eliminate. It's something we should actually celebrate and say it's a hallmark of our system. And so for that reason, following my colleague, Senator Padilla, who I know is going to come and speak on this matter, I will call up at the appropriate time this resolution and ask my colleagues to stand for the broader proposition that our justice system in this country is not perfect and it's never going to be. But because it's not perfect and because we're not perfect, we have an appellate process that provides some kind of a check against mistakes, and that is something to celebrate, not to eliminate. And that's the purpose for the bill that I'll bring before the body following Senator Padilla's comments. And with that, Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Senator Tim Kaine from Virginia talking about a number of issues. We're just going to step away for a moment, but as we were listening in live to Senator Kaine, Senator Lindsey Graham also speaking to the media in the hallway. We're going to play out his remarks in just a moment.
As long as people in Congress can game the system to get rich, they're not working for you. We have to ban them from trading stocks and ban them from cashing in as lobbyists. If you can't agree to that, then you shouldn't be in office.
Ugh, the itch. Try Dr. Scholl's Athlete's Foot Cream. Cures and prevents athlete's foot with 24-hour relief of itching. Much better. Try Dr. Scholl's Athlete's Foot Cream.
The industrial-grade products you need. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Higher energy costs, higher taxes, more spending that drives up costs. That's Sherrod Brown's record. More Washington, higher costs. John Husted will get Washington out of the way. Solutions for Ohio, not more Washington. That's John Husted.
Personalized, customized, truly custom in the community, and it's so needed.
You've got ideas, a new project, a renovation that's been waiting. Bauer gives you the tools you need to build, fix, and upgrade at prices that deliver more for your dollar. Bauer, heavy duty guaranteed.
We are continuing to follow all of the activity on Capitol Hill this Tuesday. A live look right here. And you can actually hear that ambient sound right there as the microphones are right there. This is just a stakeout camera on Capitol Hill as we've been hearing from lawmakers and just waiting on some other folks. But moments ago, as we were in live coverage, we were hearing from Senator Lindsey Graham, and we're going to play out his remarks for you right now.
Opposed to change the filibuster. I do want to try to help you get the Save America through. I think we do some stuff in reconciliation. But at the end of the day, senators get a vote. And it's a math problem. So I'm hoping we keep pushing it every week. I'd love to vote on the Save America Act every week until the election to define the difference between Republicans and Democrats. So if I had to explain to somebody from Mars what's the difference between a Democrat and Republican, I would say the Save America Act. We're for it, they're against it.
So what do you make of this memorandum of understanding right now between Iran and the U.S.? Are you confident that a deal can be reached?
I'm confident that President Trump won't sign a bad deal. The MOU as described by the Vice President and the administration seems very promising. Iranian media reports about the deal seem concerning. Once the MOU is actually released, we can all look at it. I think that would be helpful. The President's committed to doing that. He's committed to sending it to Congress. I'd like to have a diplomatic solution to Iran's nuclear ambitions. My skepticism is Iran itself. What would a good deal look like? No enrichment. And we'll see if we can get there. But at the end of the day, we're opening up the straits and we're stopping hostilities is a success of its own. But whether or not we can get phase two, I don't know. I appreciate the President trying to get a diplomatic solution. So we'll see.
Senator, do you think that to approve that final deal with Iran? Should Congress have to approve that final deal with Iran?
Yeah. I mean, when it comes to the nuclear program, yeah, that's the law, and he said he'd send it over. So,
You mentioned putting the Save America Act into a reconciliation.
As much you can't put Save America in, but you'd make down payments on it.
What about the Senate parliamentarian? I mean, do you foresee that being a roadblock?
Well, I don't see anybody changing. You still got votes. Let's say she changed her mind tomorrow. You don't have enough votes, according to the vote tallies I've seen, to eliminate the filibuster. So let's just keep voting. Make people accountable for their votes.
Senator, can the president be trusted, and can Iran be trusted to come to a good deal to end this conflict?
Well, the president can be trusted. I don't know about the Iranians. Given 47 years of deceit, I would say no. But President Trump's done more to deal with Iran than anybody since I've been around. They're the weakest they've been militarily. Their economy's in shambles. That's a result of, Epic Fury, Midnight Hammer. And the goal for me is to put Iran in a box so we can get regional peace. Saudi Arabia joins the Abraham Accords, and that will only happen if we can Iran. I'm hoping we can get a diplomatic solution to end the nuclear ambitions of Iran. Kind of up to Iran. Do they want to play that game?
What was your response to the Israeli Prime Minister's view of this whole deal? And do you think that this is?
Well, I don't think the deal won't be whole until they negotiate for 60 days. 60 days from now, if they've reached a deal, ask me about it. I'll be glad to tell you what I think of the deal. The MOU starts the process. We've opened up the straits, which will be good for gas prices and economic stability. The war is a more permanent ceasefire, which will be good. Whether or not we can achieve a diplomatic solution that meets the goal of ending Iran's nuclear ambitions, I hope so. I don't know.
Do you have confidence Have you spoken to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu about this?
No.
Do you have confidence that they'll be able to reach that deal at the end of the 60 days?
I don't know. Well, I know they'll try. Whether or not they do will be up to Iran. I think the president really wants to have a nuclear deal that would end Iran's nuclear ambitions. And the phrase is acting normal. If they act normal, they'll get relief. If they become normal, they'll get relief. The question is, are these people in charge of Iran capable of acting normal? Have they abandoned their goal of creating, a master religion for the world? I don't know. We'll see based on their actions, but if the past is any indication regarding the future, the current regime, even though they may be in level 4 or 5 of leadership, still is problematic for me. I don't think you're a leader in Iran unless you buy into the movement created by the Ayatollah in 1979, which is to purify Islam, destroy the state of Israel, and basically push the West out of the Mideast. If they've abandoned those goals, if they've abandoned their desire to create a nuclear weapon, which I think they would use, that would be a sea change in the Mideast. Having said that, they can still have those goals and not act upon them. They can be put in a box, so time will tell. But I think the president's done more to neutralize the threat Iran presents to the world than any president since 1979. Can we do more? I hope so.
Have you spoken to Vice President Vance or anyone else in the administration?
No.
All right, so there you have it. Moments ago, Senator Lindsey Graham is speaking to the media right there. I also wanted to share this live look with you. This is an event that is set to get underway momentarily. This is a live look from Minnesota as we are expecting the U.S. Attorney's Office and Homeland Security investigations to be revealing charges against members of two Minneapolis-based groups authorities have identified as Antifa organizations. They say were related for apparent ICE protests. So we do see that there is a sound check there at the podium. We did want to let you know that we're monitoring this live feed from Minneapolis as we are expecting charges to be announced against Antifa groups involved in ICE protests. For the meantime, though, we are going to just step away for a break. We'll be right back.
So you're like a mascot for a gas station?
Yeah, I guess you could say that.
You're like a gascot.
And you're a word nerd, bird.
For most businesses, hiring can take a long time. Not for Susan, though. She uses ZipRecruiter to find quality candidates fast. Spend less time hiring and more time building your business. Try for free at ZipRecruiter.com.
Welcome back to Live Now from Fox. I'm Stephanie Quinu. If you're just joining us, I did want to share a live event that we are expecting to get underway momentarily. This takes us out to Minneapolis, Minnesota. This is set to get underway in just about 11 minutes or so. We are expecting to hear from DOJ officials as they are talking about charges against Antifa groups involved in ICE protests. So we're going to be hearing from the U.S. Attorney's Office as well as Homeland Security investigations as they discuss those charges, including conspiracy to impede or injure federal officers and other crimes related to, quote, violently opposing immigration law enforcement. Now, the specific individuals charged and the exact nature of their alleged crimes have not yet been released, but we are expecting to learn just a little bit more from this event that is scheduled to get underway in just about 10 minutes time. We are going to be transitioning to that live event once it gets underway, but we do have a lot of news to get to on this Tuesday. And as we were in additional live coverage, we were getting an update on a major story that we have been closely following, and that is this. This is some file video from Toronto involving an attack on the U.S. consulate. So this is some file video right there of the scene at the time. This took place earlier this year. Well, the update now is this. A Toronto police officer was shot and killed by a suspect in the investigation into this shooting attack that damaged the facade of the U.S. consulate in Toronto. And just moments ago, we were hearing an update from Toronto police. We're going to play that out for you as we do await other live coverage from Minneapolis. So we are going to transition to that right now. And on the other side, my colleague Ryan Schmelz will continue our coverage.
Okay, 10 seconds. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Toronto Police Headquarters. Today, Chief Myron Demkew and Chief Superintendent Joe Matthews of Detective Operations will provide an update on arrests made in multiple firearm discharge investigations, including the shooting at the U.S. consulate that took place on March 10th. They will be joined by RCMP Chief Superintendent Jamie Zettler, Acting Regional Commander, Federal Policing, Central Region, Chief Superintendent Catherine Stevenson of Intelligence Services, and Inspector Pete Morris of the Emergency Task Force. Following remarks, they will be available to take questions from media. Chief Demkew.
Hello, everyone. We are here today to provide an update on an ongoing investigation into separate firearm discharges that we believe are connected. As part of this investigation, we executed a number of search warrants and arrested 2 individuals. A third individual, also alleged to be connected to these incidents, has been previously arrested by the Halton Regional Police Service in April and has since been charged with multiple offenses. Also in connection with this investigation, there's an outstanding suspect, Zara Jabi. We are doing everything we can to find and arrest him. During the operation last week, one of our members, Constable Mark Benizzato of the Emergency Task Force, was shot and killed. This is an incredibly difficult moment for all of us. Mark's family has lost a husband, a father, and a son. And as a service, we've lost a colleague and a friend. This is an SIU investigation, but I can say that the suspect in Constable Penizzato's death is in the hospital right now, in police custody, and will be charged with first-degree murder. The members of our emergency task force are amongst the highest trained officers in this country. They respond to the most dangerous calls. They protect this city. They safeguard their fellow officers. And they serve with exceptional courage. We owe them a tremendous debt of gratitude for the risks they take and the sacrifices they make each and every day. During the operation last week, we recovered 2 firearms, a 9mm handgun and a .45 caliber handgun, both of which originated in the United States of America. These details are important as this investigation involves at least 6 shooting incidents in the Greater Toronto Area linked to a 9mm handgun and at least 21 shooting incidents in the Greater Toronto Area linked to a .45 caliber firearm. This is an ongoing investigation, and we are still doing ballistic testing, and more arrests and charges could come at a later date. Before I continue, I want to thank our Integrated Gun and Gang Task Force, who worked with the support of our Counterterrorism Security Unit. I want to thank our Forensic Identification Team and the Center of Forensic Sciences. I also want to thank our partners, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police and their Emergency Response Team, and the Integrated National Security Enforcement Team, as well as the York Regional Police, Peel Regional Police, Durham Regional Police Service, and the Halton Regional Police Service. We work together. These are integrated efforts focused on doing everything we can to prevent violence, disrupt criminal activity, and hold offenders accountable. Now, today, as we're talking about these specific arrests, before I pass it over to Chief Superintendent Matthews for more details, I want to address a broader pattern we see here. What we are dealing with in this case and in other unrelated incidences, including shootings at synagogues and Jewish schools, is a recurring and similar modus operandi, and that is criminals for hire. Through encrypted messaging apps, young people are hired to carry out attacks against various targets. And in order to get paid, they're required to film their attacks. Who is paying for this? This is what we are trying to determine, including by working with our RCMP and FBI colleagues. Now, I know there's been a lot of reporting about criminal groups and foreign actors, but what I can tell you is that we are still working actively to investigate who is responsible for orchestrating these criminal acts. What we know is that bad actors are using criminal elements in our city to carry out these dangerous incidents. And it is clear that some of the people hiring these criminals want to create a sense of fear in our communities, including in the Jewish community. While we continue to follow every lead, I want to remind all levels of government of the importance of legislative reform, including key provisions in Bill C-16, such as creating a new offense for the recruitment of persons under 18 to commit a crime, and Bill C-22 on lawful access. If law enforcement does not have the tools needed to prevent violence that is planned and paid for through encrypted messaging apps, it is all of us in our communities that suffer. And the risks and consequences are very real. Thank you, and I'll now pass it over to Chief Superintendent Matthews.
Thank you, Chief. As you'll recall, on Tuesday, March 10th, 2026, 2 male suspects exited a Honda CR-V on University Avenue and fired multiple rounds into the U.S. consulate. While the building was struck by gunfire, thankfully nobody inside was injured. Surveillance video later showed the suspects firing at the building while also recording the incident on their phones. The suspect vehicle, which was stolen just prior, was found abandoned in Scarborough. The Toronto Police Integrated Gun and Gang Task Force took the lead on the investigation with support from our Counterterrorism Security Unit. At the same time, our partners at the RCMP and the Integrated National Security Enforcement Team, better known as INSET, launched a parallel investigation and classified the incident as a national security matter. As our investigation progressed, we determined this incident was connected to several other firearm discharges investigations across the GTA, both in terms of the individuals involved and the firearms being used. One of those incidents took place in Scarborough, in the Markham Road and Eglinton Avenue East area on March 25th. On March 25th, shots were fired at the front door of a unit inside a residential apartment building. Fortunately, no injuries were reported and the suspects fled the area. The following day, on March 26th, another shooting occurred in Etobicoke in the Islington and Lakeshore Boulevard West area. Shots were fired at a business, damaging the storefront. Responding officers observed a dark Honda Civic fleeing the area at a high rate of speed and initiated a pursuit. The vehicle eventually collided with a fence and the suspects fled on foot. Again, there were no reported injuries. Through the course of the investigation, the Toronto Police determined that 3 incidents were connected and identified several of the individuals alleged to be responsible. On April 14th, Jayon Berger, 18 years of age, of Barrie, was arrested by Halton Regional Police Service in connection with a separate shooting in Oakville. While in custody, he was charged by the Toronto Police Service with multiple firearm offenses related to the March 26th shooting in Etobicoke. Through these investigations, suspects were identified, and on June 11th, the Toronto Police Service and the RCMP executed multiple search warrants across Toronto. 2 individuals were arrested. Sheldon Tracy Stewart, 18, of Toronto, has been charged in relation to the shooting at the U.S. consulate. He faces multiple firearms-related charges, as well as charges for failing to comply with his release order. The loaded firearm seized during his arrest, a Glock 17 9mm handgun, has since been connected to 6 additional shootings across the Greater Toronto Area, including incidents in Toronto, Peel, York, and Durham.
All right, we are going to cut into this because it appears that the DOJ is getting ready to start this press conference now on announcing charges on Antifa-linked groups in Minneapolis. Let's go ahead and listen in live.
Today, I can disclose to you further actions by federal law enforcement in combating that violence. Last year, President Trump issued National Security Presidential Memorandum 7, which directed the Department of Justice to prioritize politically motivated violence. To accomplish that mission, the Deputy Attorney General stood up Joint Task Force Vanguard to enforce a national security strategy to investigate, prosecute, and disrupt those who engage in political violence and intimidation. Today, a federal indictment was unsealed, charging 15 defendants with conspiracy to impede or injure federal officers and other charges related to efforts of 2 Minneapolis-based Antifa groups that violently opposed the enforcement of federal law in our state. The defendants are members and associates of Direct Action Minnesota. They are charged with conspiracy to impede or injure a federal officer, solicitation to commit a crime of violence, interstate threats, interstate stalking, assault on a federal officer, and destruction of government property. Earlier this morning, agents of Homeland Security Investigations conducted a coordinated law enforcement operation culminating in the arrest of 12 of the 15 defendants. One defendant had already been in custody on other federal charges. 2 defendants remain fugitives at large. Today's charges and arrests reflect a broad federal effort to address organized, lawless behavior which seeks to disrupt the execution of federal law, endanger law enforcement, and importantly, endanger the very communities that these defendants falsely claim to be protecting. Be assured, the Department of Justice and my U.S. Attorney's Office has and will distinguish between lawful protest and criminal conduct. These defendants have been charged not for what they said, but for what they did, They all joined an agreement, a conspiracy, to interfere with lawful immigration enforcement operations. The conspiracy was not to interfere by their voice, but to do it by force. That's a crime, and it will not be tolerated in the United States. Direct Action Minnesota emphasizes their violent, militant approach to politics and are highly critical of nonviolent, peaceful protests. You see here a Facebook post from one of the defendants, Cameron Kennedy, writing, quote, "We need to become ungovernable." As the name suggests, Direct Action Minnesota is an organization dedicated to direct action against federal law and immigration enforcement. This action is not peaceful, it's obstructive, disruptive, and unlawful. The organization trains its members in the aggressive use of shields against law enforcement, surveillance, operational planning, and rapid mobilization against law enforcement actions. Though investigations are ongoing, what we know now is that Direct Action Minnesota is comprised of members of subgroups. For example, the Black Hat Workers Collective. The Black Hat Workers Collective is a Minneapolis-based Antifa affinity group which advocates, promotes, and utilizes militant tactics and violence. Here you can see that their Facebook cover page shows as a banner the burning down of the Minneapolis Police Department's 3rd Precinct. One of the leaders of Direct Action Minnesota, Defendant Kyle Wagner, identifies himself as Antifa, and he doesn't shy away from it.
My name is Kyle, I'm Antifa, and there's so much rage in me that I've had to record this like 15 times trying to get the message out. They fucked up, okay? Go watch my other videos, doesn't matter if you're not here and you're not caught up, you've missed the fuck.
All right, we're going to leave the audio down for a little bit. This announcement or this video that's being posted has a lot of profanity, so we're going to wait until this wraps.
We're not talking about peaceful protests. His words, not mine. During Operation Metro Surge, Direct Action Minnesota infiltrated and exploited lawful protests to more efficiently carry out its unlawful direct actions, targeting operations involving ICE as well as other federal law enforcement, and as well as other state law enforcement. In order to achieve the ends of the conspiracy, Direct Action Minnesota was highly organized, holding meetings on a regular basis, and engaged in what they called operational security, or OPSEC. The indictment unsealed today includes a focus on 2 days in which Direct Action Minnesota organized and participated in actions against federal and local law enforcement on January 23, 2026, and on March 1st, 2026. On those days, Direct Action Minnesota members deployed what they called hard and soft blockades against federal law enforcement, as well as against Hennepin County Sheriff's deputies. Direct Action Minnesota shut down operations at the Federal Whipple Building, a government building just north of the Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport and the main hub for several federal agencies. Members of their hard blockade team used vehicles, RV trailers that they would overturn, check hedgehogs, and ice blocks that they would throw at law enforcement to obstruct roads used by law enforcement near the Whipple building in order to impede the movement of law enforcement. Members of their soft blockade team used homemade shields constructed from plastic, wood, and metal to physically resist the efforts of law enforcement and to aggressively break through teams of officers on foot. Direct Action Minnesota members also engaged in what they called commuting tactics, which included identifying, following, surveilling, harassing, and confronting law enforcement officers. Conspiracy members even followed law enforcement officers from locations like the Whipple building, to the officers' homes. For example, as alleged in the indictment on May 4, 2026, defendant Isaac Sant followed federal officers from the Whipple building all the way to Hudson, Wisconsin, where St. Croix County deputies stopped him. Such stalking and other direct actions against law enforcement are criminal, they're un-American, and they'll be met with swift justice. That's why we're here today. To those who choose to threaten or harm federal officers, we will hold you accountable. We will defend federal officers, we will protect the public, we will enforce the law. I want to thank our partners at Homeland Security Investigations for their outstanding work on this case. And I now ask the Special Agent in charge of Homeland Security Investigations here in Minnesota, Michael McCarthy, to provide further illumination for us.
Thank you, U.S. Attorney Rosen, for your steadfast partnership. Good morning. My name is Michael McCarthy, and I am the Special Agent in charge for Homeland Security Investigations St. Paul. Today's announcement is the result of a thorough and months-long investigation into a deeply concerning trend: coordinated violence targeting federal law enforcement officers and facilities. These acts were designed to create chaos, disrupt operations, and threaten the safety of our officers and our community. Every day, officers and agents kiss their loved ones goodbye, fully aware of the dangers they face as they risk their lives to protect their communities. Each and every one of us in the law enforcement community does so with the ultimate goal of making it home to our families each night. We are sons, daughters, mothers, and fathers. We swore an oath to protect and serve, and we place the public's well-being above our own safety without hesitation and often without recognition. Make no mistake, officers and agents do not have the luxury of deciding when they should and should not do their job. The law is the law. Over the past several months, we have seen organized groups deliberately plan and carry out criminal acts, including assaults, threats, destruction of government property, and efforts to obstruct federal officers. Much of the recent civil unrest in the metro area has been linked to anti-ICE demonstrations. Let me be clear. Peaceful protest is a protected right and a cornerstone of our democracy. We respect and defend that right. However, there's a clear line that cannot be crossed. When protest turns into rioting, violence, or criminal activity, it becomes unlawful and it will not be tolerated. Unfortunately, some groups have crossed that line. Working closely with the U.S. Attorney's Office, our investigation uncovered extensive planning, material support, and coordinated attacks against federal personnel and facilities. Our teams have worked tirelessly, conducting surveillance, reviewing camera footage, and analyzing large volumes of information to identify those responsible. I want to thank all the agents and staff whose dedication and professionalism made these indictments possible. Our message is clear. You may not agree with the laws. You may protest the laws, but you must follow the laws or face the consequences. It is not optional. We will enforce the law. Any attempt to undermine it through violence or intimidation will be met with decisive action. Our primary responsibility is to ensure the safety of our officers and the broader community. Today's arrests are an important milestone, but this is not the finish line. HSI and our partners remain committed to identifying, investigating, and bringing to justice anyone who promotes or engages in violence against law enforcement or our communities. Again, I thank the U.S. Attorney's Office for their partnership. Together, we are committed to protecting our officers, our communities, and the rule of law. Thank you.
And if you have some questions, I'll be happy to take them. I just ask that each of you just tell me your name and the organization that you're here reporting for, and eventually over time I'll start to learn all of your names. Yes, ma'am.
Madison McVan with Minnesota Reformer. The Star Tribune has reported that more than 1/3 of prosecutors' cases against people charged with protesting or stalking federal officers during Operation Metro Surge have already been dismissed or failed in some way. Why is this case different?
Well, I don't think any cases have failed in any way, but I will tell you, read the indictment and you'll understand the full magnitude of this case. Yes, sir.
Well, to follow up on that, it's actually half now. I've been tracking these 18 U.S.C. 111 cases closely. Of 36, 18 have been dropped entirely, 3 with prejudice. There are non-prosecution agreements in at least 11 others. A magistrate judge called one of the affidavits that Special Agent Richard Berger had signed, one of many, a false affidavit, and was unclear why your office was continuing to prosecute this case. How can the courts be assured, how can juries be assured that what's in this indictment and these affidavits is true and is based on facts?
You watch how this case plays out, you watch how the evidence plays out, and the evidence will prove it all out. Yes, sir.
Clint Combs, Minnesota spokesman reporter. On January 22, federal agents went to the Olaf Hotel and were seeking an arrest warrant for Nikema Levy Armstrong. They mistaken one of her roommates and tackled her. She wasn't arrested until several months later. Jordan Kushner, Nikema Levy Armstrong's attorney, said that there was a deal for her to turn herself in peacefully. Was there a deal between the DOJ's office and Nikema Levy Armstrong for her to peacefully turn herself in? And if so, what led to that decision to arrest her at the hotel?
The answer is any deal for her peaceful surrender was that she walk out of the hotel room that she was hiding in, and she says, I surrendered to the federal law enforcement officers that were in the hallway, and that's exactly what occurred. Yes, sir.
Can you say where, Scott Johnson with the Site Power Line, can you say where the video of Kyle Wagner came from?
I think I can say.
Instagram.
Instagram, Scott.
Thank you.
Yes.
Taylor Rivera, WCCO Radio. What can you tell us about the fugitives involved in this case? Where does that investigation stand, and can you share who that is?
Are you talking about the 2 people that I said that are still at large? These are 2 people who know that they are being sought by federal law enforcement and have not yet surrendered. We expect that they will surrender peacefully. They are aware of it, and I think that they probably understand.
The indictment was only unveiled at 11 a.m.
We are aware that they know specifically, and I do believe that they will understand that the best move for them is to surrender. Yes.
Janice Shortle, Care 11. You talked about to threaten those who wish to threaten or harm. They will be held accountable. They will be prosecuted. Here in Minnesota and across the country, people still have questions as to why there isn't any prosecution or any charges filed against the officers who shot and killed Renee Good or the officers who shot and killed Alex Preddy.
Those investigations are ongoing. They are ongoing in the way that proper federal law enforcement investigations ought to proceed. They will proceed to their completion, and they'll proceed to their completion in the proper pace and at the proper time.
So they are investigating both cases, the shooting of Renee Good and the shooting of Alex Preddy?
I think that's been reported many, many times that both...
Just checking in on that.
Agencies? Who's investigating? Which agencies are investigating?
We're not going to get into the details of those investigations here today, but I can assure all of you that it has been reported previously. Federal law enforcement is investigating in both cases. Yes, sir.
Nathan O'Neill, Fox 9. You talked about coordinated attacks. What kind of injuries did officers sustain as part of these campaigns, if any? Can you elaborate on that at all?
I can't elaborate on that today, and I don't believe I used the word attacks, but if I did, I stand by it.
Sahan Journal. For Defendant Wagner,
Did you guys have any documentation of him actually bringing any firearms out into the street, or any of his followers bringing firearms out into the street after this video?
I think the specifics of the evidence in that case we're going to allow to roll out in the normal course of events through the court, through a proper prosecution. And right now we'll let the indictments stand on their own. Yes.
Hi, Karen Scullen, Fox 9. I'm just wondering if these two groups, the Black Cat Workers Collective and Direct Action, are they still operating? And are those two groups that you continue to monitor?
Well, what I will say with regard to ongoing federal law enforcement efforts is that if you are actively conspiring to impede law enforcement, actively conspiring to commit the acts that today's indictment alleges, you ought to go on the assumption that we're watching you and that will get you. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Ben Henry, private witness news. Words like attack and assault were used during this press conference. What evidence do you have? I know it was asked of any officers or people, but what evidence do you have that these assaults and attacks took place?
We have video evidence, we have eyewitness testimony, and all of that evidence will roll out in the normal course of a prosecution.
Press conference day like you did, with a few still images. Why not show some of these attacks today?
We're showing what we think is necessary in order to get the story out, and I recommend that you read the indictment. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Aaron Johnson, Community Press. About these organizations, is apart from to kind of ride the coattails of that, we saw a lot of interactions with ICE and community members all across the city. Were there any sort of corresponding insignias that identified them as these specific groups?
I'm sorry, that identified who? These 15 defendants as these specific groups?
You said Black Cat, and forgive me, I forget the other off the top of my head. Were they wearing armbands, logos that specifically identify, forgive me, I have a disability, I read, that
take your time.
Their group, or whatever we want to call it.
So the MO of these particular operators is to exploit legal protests that were ongoing for their illegal acts. As a part of that, they did not always disclose who they were to those that might otherwise been lawful actors in protest.
Since I don't have the indictment in front of me, can you tell me of the 15, how many are from Minnesota?
Good question. I think, do we have that number with us?
All of them.
All of them.
Are they all from the Twin Cities area?
Brian?
They are.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Rob Kuznia with CNN. Kyle Wagner identified himself as Antifa. How are you connecting the other groups in the P and defendants to that?
Okay, so that again falls into the realm of the evidence that'll roll out in the course of the prosecution, and I understand that the indictments were only unsealed 15 minutes before this press conference, but I do recommend that you read it, and your question will at least be answered in part. Yes, sir.
This might also be in the indictment, but how is DOJ, how do you define Antifa? What is Antifa?
So what is Antifa goes beyond, I think, the scope of what this indictment is. But what we can tell you is that we have plenty of people that self-identify in that way, and you might want to ask them that question.
Is that a crime to be part of affiliating with this group, if it is even a group?
It's a crime to conspire for the purpose of impeding or injuring federal officers. It's a crime to conspire together in order to commit crimes of violence. It's a crime to get together to stalk. It's a crime to get together to make threats. It's a crime to get together to assault federal officers. It's a crime to get together to destroy federal property.
So those
Yes.
are all stock crimes. How many officers were injured or actually assaulted as a result of these events?
I'm sorry. I'm not sure that anything I just said is a thought crime. I don't think. I'm not following the question. Yes,
Well, how
ma'am.
many were injured? How many of these officers were injured as a result of these alleged actions? That was the question there.
So again, all of the numbers on this will all roll out in the course of the prosecution. But you understand here that we have a group of people who quite deliberately got together, planned violence, used violence, and whether or not the extent to which they actually achieved their ends of harming people, whether it was by the overturning of vehicles and RVs in the street, whether it was by the throwing of ice blocks at vehicles, whether it was by use of their vehicles in other ways, whether it was by their stalking, whether or not they actually at the end of the day caused bodily harm is not the measure of whether or not they committed a serious federal crime. And I would dare say, we just cannot have in this country all people getting together, engaging in all of these violent acts, and then simply saying, well, nobody got hurt, so how bad could it have been?
Are you
Yes,
saying
ma'am.
that no officers were injured?
I'm not saying that.
Do you anticipate more arrests related to operations like these?
We'll talk about other arrests at other times. Today we'll talk about these 15. Yes, sir.
And Dick Ferraro, Pioneer Press. I believe President Donald Trump has labeled Antifa as a terrorist group. Did you consider those charges in these cases?
Well, we considered and we charged we charged the crimes for which we have the evidence to convict these individuals. I can take two more questions. Yes.
One last follow-up on what I was asking about earlier. So there are internal investigations by Border Patrol and DHS with the officers involved in the Pretty and the Good shootings. If those come up with any evidence, would you consider charging any officers in the shootings of Renee Good and Alex Pretty?
If the evidence shows that we can prosecute and convict somebody beyond a reasonable doubt, we will charge. We will not undercharge. We will not overcharge, but we will pursue federal prosecution in the manner that the evidence dictates. Yes, sir.
Posted online?
Great question. Is the indictment posted online yet?
It's publicly filed.
It's publicly filed now with the court.
Can we get case numbers?
We will, I'll tell you what, ask Hong Bui, who is in the back of the room, and Hong will make sure that you get all of it. All right.
CR 115 is where it's at. An estimate of how many agents were injured in the accident?
I think we've already been through that. All right. Thank you very much.
So there will be a press conference outside the plaza of the federal courthouse from community members and the National Lawyers Guild responding to the allegations in this indictment and this continuing act of...
All right, there you have it. The Department of Justice having that press conference announcing charges against 15 defendants related to actions in Minnesota from ICE protest, accusing these 15 of conspiracy as well as numerous other charges related to what happened with those ICE protests, saying that they were chaotic and also designed to create chaos and disrupt ICE-related operations. They had that video there of one of the suspects and what he posted on social media leading up to this. What appeared to be a profanity-laced rant that was going on where he covered a number of different issues. But the thing that stood out there was saying that he did not believe in peaceful protest. And that was something that prosecutors there certainly used when deciding whether or not they were going to place charges against these protesters and these Antifa-linked groups. Two of them named in this indictment here. One of them was the Black Cat Workers. The other was... don't have it in front of me, Direct Action Minnesota. So something certainly to follow. One other question that probably stood out towards the end there was the question related to Alex Pretty and Renee Good. They were asked if there's going to be charges in those investigations. They said the investigations are still ongoing related to Pretty and Renee Good. And it did say towards the end that if there is evidence that worthy of charges, that certainly is something that is possible. So a lot to follow here. I'm Ryan Schmelz. Welcome back into Live Now from Fox. We do need to get to our first commercial break of this hour. We're a little behind on those, but we'll have more on the alleged plot that the FBI just charged several suspects in related to a planned attack at the White House during the UFC event. So we'll talk to a former NYPD detective when we get back from break.
We want this to be a refuge.
Rural First is exceptional in their flexibility. They understand the situation and the needs of people who are wanting to move to the country.
Lock in with deals on all your game day snacks and groceries. Store game day deals for a limited time on Uber Eats.
Higher energy costs, higher taxes, more spending that drives up costs. That's Sherrod Brown's record. More Washington, higher costs. John Husted will get Washington out of the way. Solutions for Ohio, not more Washington. That's John Husted.
That kind of getting to where you need to be, that's what I hope to build in the community, and it's so needed.
From hard hats to steel-toed boots, Grainger's got your safety needs covered, literally. Shop Grainger's vast inventory of safety products. Call, click, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Welcome back into Live Now from Fox. I'm Ryan Schmelz. We're going to take this tweet right now from Bill Malhusian, which is the latest here from the alleged plot that happened over the weekend related to the White House UFC event here. Breaking details via federal arrest affidavit reveal that a California man named Michael Allen Thomas was one of the alleged organizers of the alleged UFC White House terror plot. Feds say he admitted he believes the U.S. government is run by elites who sacrifice and eat children, had involvement with Jeffrey Epstein, and are protected by President Trump. Investigators took screenshots of his signal chats in which details of the plot were discussed and maps of the UFC event were shown with suggestions on where snipers should be placed. Feds also recovered rifles and ammo. Sources tell colleague David Spunt those in custody are American citizens, and there is no foreign nexus believed to be at play. Now, we're going to go and bring in Robert Garland. He's a former NYPD detective. And, sir, what do you make of where this plot stands right now? What has been revealed so far by the FBI related to it?
The biggest takeaway with modern law enforcement and counterterrorism is, how the public often judges us, how things are done after the fact. They don't really look at things or anything, what goes into the investigatory process before this. So to prevent an attack, to prevent something like that with the tweet that's going on, you really got to commend the FBI, local law enforcement, and all the different jurisdictions that work together to really prevent an event from happening.
And I think it stands out, too, that, yes, it appears that whatever law enforcement tactics were used here, whatever was utilized, it worked because this plot was foiled. If it did happen, it did not really make it into the public eye until days later. But, of course, there's just this heightened threat environment and this concerning threat environment, whether you got the conflict in Iran ongoing, but also the fact that we've seen numerous assassination attempts against President Trump, including one not that long ago at the White House Correspondents' Dinner.
Yes, I believe Kash Patel said it best. He said they're prepared and they're ready to make sure that we're defending against anything that comes in, any types of threats to protect the U.S. citizen, right? And I worked in narcotics for a long time. I was NYPD for a long time. And anything that we did, before we did any types of search warrants, any investigatory process, we were going behind the scenes for a long time, whether it be a month, 6 months, a year, to make sure that our team was safe, all the citizens around us were safe when we were executing any types of warrants. So, you really got to commend everyone that went into these investigations to make sure that this attack was stopped and prevented. And people think about, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was going to say, go ahead and finish your point, actually.
But I was going to say, 20 years ago, the biggest threat that we had walking into an event such as the UFC 250 were metal detectors, right? Walking in metal detectors, that's all people were concerned about if someone was carrying something in. But now you have to be prepared beforehand. There's encrypted messages going on. There's Facebook messages, Instagram, X, all these different encrypted messages going around, and there's people planning things behind the scenes. And that's where the FBI, Secret Service, and different agencies work together to prevent something like this from happening.
And what do you think stands out to you so far about the details that have been released by the FBI?
I mean, listen, they're going to release whatever information they need to release just to appease the public, right? So they're not going to release everything that goes on to the investigatory process, what's being actually protected, what was actually stopped beforehand. But again, you have to commend them for everything that they're doing.
And I think the question too was what kind of stands out to you about what went into the nexus here, what was kind of a part of this plot? Is there anything that stands out to you that might be concerning, or do you think there could be possibly other people potentially arrested down the road related to this?
I mean, listen, it could be an event where they're trying to cause a public stir to see how the public reacts to it, to see how the FBI reacts to it, Secret Service and local law enforcement. And there could be something else down the line, sure. But again, FBI, Secret Service, local law enforcement, everyone's working together behind the scenes right now to make sure that something like this does not happen. And if arrests are made down the line, the news may never even hear about it.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting about this one too, and what's concerning about this one too, this was a huge event. It was a sporting event at the White House, so you have the political factor involved with this, but you also have the athletic factor involved in this too. And we should probably remind everyone that the FIFA World Cup is currently ongoing, so there are not just one major sporting event going on. This is numerous sporting events at some of the United States' most populous cities happening right now as we talk.
Yeah, I mean, these events are great. It's fantastic what went on at UFC 250 at the White House. It's fantastic what's going on FIFA Cup with the Knicks, even everything that went on. But again, we have to commend our law enforcement officers, the first responders that are on scene protecting everybody there. I wouldn't say that anybody should be concerned going to any of these events. The FBI, Secret Service, everyone has it under control. And I have faith in them, and I'm sure a lot of the American public does as well.
And what impressed you the most about how they were able to foil this alleged plot and what kind of went into stopping it? Obviously, we don't know all the details yet. The FBI is probably still going to come out and kind of give us the play-by-play of how this was stopped. But we do have a decent amount of information from the arrest affidavits and what's been released so far. But what do you think stands out about how the FBI was able to foil this that stands out to you?
I mean, again, I'm not privy to all the information that came out, right? Only what the news has, what you guys have right here, and that's in the public eye. But for me, as a former and retired NYPD detective that works complex investigations, I know what really goes on behind the scenes. I know how deep it is and what is actually happening. So, you just have to commend all the hard work that they're doing, and they're working together because a lot of planning happens to just work together with different agencies. I worked with HSI, I worked with DEA and NYPD all at the same time for a large-scale wiretap investigation that I did almost 10 years ago. So I know what goes on behind the scenes, and they're making sure everyone's protected and everyone's safe.
And I think something interesting too about some of these terror plots that have been foiled in the last couple of years is we talk a lot about the problems that social media creates and the problems and the divisiveness and even sometimes the radicalization that happens on social media from terror organizations. But at the same time too, some of these suspects have really mailed out what they're doing and given investigators more evidence to charge them, but also more ways to catch them before anything bad can happen.
Yeah, sometimes they don't realize that there's so much tracking information that goes on when they just post something online. A lot of people think that they're anonymous. Is anything really anonymous anymore?
That's a good question. Yeah. No, and also too, I mean, these group chats can be subpoenaed. Sometimes these text messages can be tracked too, and sometimes the social media companies can report them themselves.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, listen, you could submit warrants and get search warrants just for social media information in a heartbeat. So I'm sure with this type of investigation, they're working behind the scenes to do that as well.
And is this also, I think, in some cases, a good example of, hey, if you see something online that's shady, say something. I mean, I remember a couple years ago, I had to flag a Twitter post because a former Senate candidate who was a coworker of mine, he was a weatherman who ran for office, somebody had replied to a tweet related to him saying we should go after his family. And I mean, I had to flag that for both Twitter and also submit it to the FBI. I mean, you see these things all the time, and it's really important to say something when you do see it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's terrible what happened with that, but you did the right thing. And people they see things and they always expect the next person to do it. And that's the problem in today's society sometimes. They expect the next person to do it. If you see something, say something. There's no problem with that.
Absolutely. Robert Garland, you've been very generous with your time. Former NYPD detective. We'll definitely want to have you back on Live Now from Fox. Thank you so much for your insight.
Thank you, Ryan. Appreciate it.
All right, let's go ahead and get to our next break of the hour. We'll be back with more news.
Build your perfect storage setup with U.S. General, only at Harbor Freight.
I tried a ton of AI work tools. Then I tried Monday.com. Game over. Monday.com is super easy to use and knows how to do AI right. I use it for insights and action suggestions constantly, especially on those back-to-back meeting days. And my team used Monday Sidekick to work up all kinds of marketing content for the different platforms. So stuff that takes my team hours is now done before they even open their laptop. All these AI features are built directly into Monday.com and actually use our real data. With Monday.com, AI isn't some over-promising future. It's here. It just works. Like, actually saves us time and resources kind of works.
Monday Sidekick. AI you'll love to use. Start a free trial today at Monday.com.